Our guest today in this IPI Global Observatory interview series with candidates vying to become the next United Nations Secretary General is Dr. Srgjan Kerim, Foreign Affairs Advisor to the Prime Minister of the Republic of Macedonia, former Foreign Minister of his country, and former President of the UN General Assembly. I'm going to be asking Dr. Kerim the same four questions that we are putting to the other candidates for Secretary General whom we are interviewing for the Global Observatory. We have shared these questions with him in advance, as we have with all the other interviewees. Dr. Kerim, first, the United Nations Charter describes the Secretary General as the, quote, Chief Administrative Officer of the organization, unquote, and the person who can call the attention of the Security Council to matters the Secretary General believes may threaten international peace and security. But the job has evolved into something much more than that, a mix of global diplomacy and oversight of the UN's Executive Office, serving the three pillars of the organization: human rights, peace and security, and development. How would you shape the job and define your priorities for the office?
Thank you for asking this question. My understanding of the role of the Secretary General derives, exactly as you said, from the job description contained in the Charter. The United Nations is an intergovernmental organization based on a charter which has survived 70 years, and not only survived, which has clearly demonstrated that the foundations laid for the establishment of this organization are very stable and sustainable. Having said that, I see the role of the Secretary General both ways: as a general who is head of a 40,000 people army which belongs to the Secretariat, and as a secretary to the member states, to the membership. This position requires, first of all, stamina, then managerial skills. Managerial skills you cannot pick up working in ministries or government or some similar institutions. Business is the area where you can really learn about the influence of good management to the results of an organization. And we cannot simply continue thinking that the UN is a political organization and therefore it is less important to conduct business in a managerial way there. On the contrary, this organization is spending money of millions of taxpayers across the globe, and therefore it is accountable to these people and accountable to the whole world population for its results. Therefore, the Secretary General must focus on a serious and comprehensive management reform, and that's something I definitely made my top priority as a candidate. My second point is that the Sustainable Development Agenda, the financing of development agenda, the climate change issues, they have to be streamlined, which means we have to start thinking in a streamlined way. How do we implement these three issues, not on separate tracks, but in a united way, an integrated way? And the third point is the security structure. The security structure is very important. It has to be modernized. It has to be adopted to the challenges and threats of today's world. We are facing cyber war, we are facing terrorist, guerrilla operations, terrorist acts. everywhere across the globe. That means that the peacekeepers, the peace building, all the available instruments have to be adopted to that. And the guys who are risking their lives for the United Nations, for the sake and for the cause of peace and security in the world, they must be trained in an appropriate way in order first to make sure that their lives are not threatened, but then that they protect really the innocent people there on the ground, women, children, and other parts of the local population. And last but not least, I think therefore the reform efforts made by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon deserve to be continued, reinforced. One has to build up on that and make the organization and leave it in a better shape.
The second question, can you discuss aspects of your background and professional career that manifest, one, proven leadership, managerial abilities, and strategic vision; two, extensive experience in international relations and multilateral diplomacy; and three, strong global communication skills?
Well, let me start with the first one. I have in my CV 4, so to say, ways how I've developed as a person and my professional career. I've been a university professor, I've been a politician, I've been a diplomat, and I've been a businessman. Having said that, I would like to mention my experience as CEO. I've been CEO of a multinational media group with 12,000 employees in Southeastern Europe, encompassing 7 countries, and more than 30 newspapers and magazines across Southeastern Europe. My specialty within this 10 years period was to establish from the scratch a media organization in my own country, in Macedonia. And I've done that based on the model of media print. I've invented it myself. This model is based on synergies, creating synergies. You simply deprive and put the newsrooms as separate units, only with editorials and journalists. All the rest, accounting, technicians, all the other stuff is separated and put under the management umbrella. So the newsrooms are only newsrooms. I started with 3 of them. Now we have 7. 4 daily newspapers, 2 magazines, and also 2 online editions. One is a portal and the other one is an online news agency. Altogether 480 people, but the synergies, they are created on the intertwined relations between the brands, the distribution, and the printing house. So they are all under one umbrella called the Media Print model, and the company is called Media Print Macedonia. It has 480 people. It works with profit. It's been 10 years since it has founded. Now I have handed over to younger people, to other people. I'm now busy with the UN, with my campaigning after 10 years, but I can say it's a very solid company. It's the largest media company in the printing area in the whole region of Southeastern Europe. And what is interesting from the point of view of the UN, in this company of 480 people, more than 70% are women. So we don't need to complain about gender equality. On the contrary. The second point concerning my experience in multilateral affairs. I've been in multilateral affairs since 33 years. I've started as an advisor of the president of UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. Then I have continued working in the UN system as vice president of two very important summit meetings, the one on sustainable development in Johannesburg, the other one on financing for development in Monterrey. I have been permanent representative of my country to the United Nations. I have been envoy of the President of the General Assembly on the revitalization of the General Assembly and of the Secretary General on climate change. And last but not least, President of the United Nations General Assembly on its 62nd session. So throughout this period of more than 3 decades, I have really developed my personality, my skills as a diplomat, truly through all the multilateral forums which I have mentioned, including being deputy coordinator of the Stability Pact for Southeastern Europe in Europe, which is also a multilateral position, and being the first chairman of the Conference of European Security and Cooperation in 1990 in Bonn in Germany, which was organized under the umbrella of the organization and devoted to economic cooperation between East and West. So all in all, through my activities in the G77 and in the non-aligned movement as Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of former Yugoslavia, I've covered all the segments of multilateralism. When it comes to North-South, when it comes to East-West, including the attempt which I made a long time ago, 25 years ago, with Jacques Attali, who was the Sherpa then of President Mitterrand of France. The two of us, we initiated a very interesting initiative and launched the process of cooperation between the G7 and the so-called G15, G15 being countries from the South. That was actually a close relative of what we have today and what we know today of G20 actually. That was the first attempt. It did not end up then with success, but still it is worthwhile to be mentioned. So this is the second dimension. And the third dimension, communication. Communication is part of my life. I have written 10 books. This is the way you communicate with people. I have a website now while campaigning, communicating permanently with people. And I can tell you an anecdote. When I was ambassador of Macedonia to Germany, and this Kosovo war started, and the crisis, and people in Germany, in the public, was not completely aware what's going on there. They always say, there, down there. We are down there, the Balkans. I made, believe it or not, within 3 months, 96 interviews for German TV stations, for German radio stations, for German newspapers, in order to bring the attention of the German people and the German politicians to the problem there on the ground in Kosovo, in Macedonia, in the whole region, and to mobilize them to help, to assist, to be present there with humanitarian assistance, with help of any kind. So this is always a part of my life. And my last book has three chapters which have to do with communication. My last book is called Globalization and Diplomacy. It has 12 chapters, and in 3 chapters I'm dealing with public diplomacy, the role of media, and the global partnerships, which are again related to organizations such as UN and many other stakeholders, which have to do with indirectly with the work of the United Nations. So I think all in all these moments in my CV, in my career so far, are more than a convincing proof that it is fully justified why I've decided to run this time for the position of the Secretary General of the United Nations.
The third question is about the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement. The 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement afford the UN an opportunity to move forward under the most comprehensive Sustainable Development Agenda in its history. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals, known as the SDGs, have universal application to all countries, from north to south. They integrate the three fundamental aspects of development: economic, social, and environmental, and they include issues that were once outside the scope of development, particularly peace and climate change. How do you see the Secretary General's role in promoting and prioritizing this overall agenda?
I think from the point of view of the Secretary General, this cluster, this complex of topics should be the easiest one. Why? Because we have decisions made by member states. We have programs, we have agreements, we have all the necessary requisites to move forward. But that is very tricky. That doesn't mean that the Secretary General should regard that as a finished business. On the contrary, now the role of the Secretary General is to mobilize all the available forces in the Secretariat and outside of the UN. Let me give you concrete examples. How do I see that? For instance, the Secretary General must cooperate closely with his team with the Global Compact to see and to realize exactly what the private sector can do in the implementation of the Sustainable Development. So what can the private sector do, and how will it assist in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, of the climate change agreement? Also, other private sector segments besides and beyond the Global Compact have to be involved for the financing of development goals, because the key issue there is the PPP, the private-public partnership. So if you want to promote the private-public partnership, you should not only contact governments and push governments to do it, you must find ways and means how to attract the attention and the interest of the private sector. This is a very important task for the Secretary General. Another important task for the Secretary General is, with his presence, to make the public opinion, the whole world, aware. If I'm elected Secretary General, the first journey outside of New York, although I would spend first many weeks here to sort things out in the Secretariat, in the home, in the 38th floor, in the headquarters, but then to pay attention to the small island states. I would go and visit them to show people that these remote islands are not only there for fun and for tourism and attractive tourist destinations. They are members of this organization under threat of climate change, and to find ways and means how to engage the organization to deal with the issues in a preventive way, because preventive diplomacy must be the alpha and omega of the Secretary General and his team. Preventive diplomacy applied to the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals and the whole complex issues related to it, but also in the hotspots, Middle East, Africa, some parts of Asia, even Europe. We know that we have conflicts there. All that must be part of his permanent engagement, and therefore I would even form two task forces in the cabinet of the Secretary General, one dealing with these preventive diplomacy issues which are of external character, and another one which will deal with the internal issues, how to make the Secretariat more efficient, the cabinet of the Secretary General, the whole organization here, so that they can deliver in a better, and as we say, we have coined this phrase in the UN long time ago, but we don't implement it properly, to deliver as one. If we want to deliver as one, the Secretary General has to be the one who will lead this game. That will include also to review the presence of the UN on the ground and to see where the UN is not necessary anymore. And based on that, to save money spent out there and to rechannel this money to other critical spots where the UN is more than required. So it's an endless story, so to say, what the Secretary General has to do. Therefore, I think we need a result-oriented person, a person with stamina, with character, and let me end up with this conclusion. If I'm elected, I will run for one term in office, not only to avoid calculations for the second term, but guided by one and the same goal and principle. That is, I will set up targets for this 5 years tenure, and if they are accomplished, then we can talk whether to continue or not. If not, I'm going to take my hat and go home, because I don't need others to remind me that something hasn't been accomplished, which I have promised and said before I was elected.
There's one last question, which is an open question. Is there something you would like to elaborate on or emphasize in outlining your thoughts on the job of UN Secretary General and its possibilities?
There is only one thing. We have become very enthusiastic now during this process of transparency, of involving the member states, the public opinion, everybody in the process of selection. And that's okay with me. I accept it, I understand it, I support it. But on the other hand, we should not forget that we are not electing the Secretary General of the world. We are electing the Secretary General of an intergovernmental organization called the United Nations, and it's not the only one. There are many out there. And bearing that in mind, we should not exaggerate and expect the Secretary General to make the world better or to reshape it, but rather to limit his mandate and tenure to make the organization better. And that would be a significant contribution to a better world. And that would be always on my mind if I'm elected. Reshape, make the UN better, there you will accomplish your mission.
Srgjan Kerim, thank you for talking to the Global Observatory.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hogg.